Senior doctors call for a change to the Pfizer vaccine rollout, saying the long delay between doses is difficult to justify. The British Medical Association wants the gap between jabs to be reduced by half.
At least it would be in keeping with international best practice guidance. There is no other nation internationally that has adopted a 12-week delay.
Well, despite the calls, the government is standing firm with its strategy, arguing it could save lives. Also tonight, the Prime Minister and President Biden speak for the first time since the inauguration and pledge to work together towards a green recovery. In Russia, thousands are arrested as supporters of the jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny take to the streets.
Oh no, he's gone.
And a 6 wickets haul for James Anderson as England's star bowler shines against Sri Lanka in Galle. Hello, very good evening to you. Senior doctors have called on the government to shorten the gap between the first and second doses of Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccinations. In a letter to England's chief medical officer, which has been seen by the BBC, the doctors' union, the BMA, called the gap of a maximum 12 weeks difficult to justify and said it could potentially undermine the effectiveness of the jab. However, the government argues it could save lives by allowing more people to receive a first jab more quickly. Our health correspondent Anna Collinson reports.
They're used to taking care of others, but they're now the ones being looked after. Today, thousands of health and social care workers, like here in Glasgow, have been receiving their coronavirus vaccine.
Get the vaccines out, obviously do your dosage countage.
And from Scotland to South Wales and the Llyn Peninsula, this pilot aims to reach those who are unable to travel to the larger sites.
Very pleased and looking forward to the next one.
But while the rollout rolls on, so do questions about the gap between the first and second dose. As pressures intensified on hospitals in December, the dosage gap was extended to 12 weeks. The UK's chief medical officers said millions of the most vulnerable were more likely to become severely ill without a jab, and this was the best way to reach more of them quickly. But some senior doctors want the interval for the Pfizer jab reduced to 6 weeks.
That would still allow many more people to have a first dose compared to a 3-week interval, but at least it would be in keeping with international best practice guidance. There is no other nation internationally that has adopted a 12-week delay.
Data suggests the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is still effective when doses are given 12 weeks apart, but Pfizer only has data for the first 3 weeks. Even so, many scientists have defended the UK's current approach, calling it a balance of risks.
I totally support the decision to extend the gap between doses. I think looking at the evidence in total, I think that is strongly supportive of that. And I think on this particular occasion, the BMA has probably got it wrong.
Ministers say the current process is the right move and will be particularly keen to reassure anyone who has concerns. This mosque in Birmingham is the first in the UK to become a vaccination centre, one more measure to try and reach the most vulnerable. Anna Collinson, BBC News.
All right, well, let's take a look then at the latest government figures. 33,552 new coronavirus infections recorded. That's in the latest 24-hour period. On average, the number of new cases reported per day in the last week, 37,157. 37,899 people in hospital with coronavirus over the 7 days to Thursday, and 1,348 deaths were reported. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. On average in the past week, 1,248 deaths announced every day. The total number of deaths so far across the UK is 97,329. The UK's programme of mass vaccinations continues to ramp up with a new daily record for the rollout. 478,248 people have had their first dose of one of the 3 approved COVID-19 vaccines in the latest 24-hour period. It takes the overall number of people who've had their first jab to 5,861,351. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has spoken to the new US President, Joe Biden, for the first time since he entered the White House on Wednesday. The two leaders spoke on the phone earlier this evening. Our political correspondent, Chris Mason, is here. They're said to have discussed a green recovery.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a political spectator sport immediately after the inauguration of a new American president that people start to look at what order does the new president make phone calls to international leaders. It is a crude metric of relative importance, but hey, it's a metric nonetheless. And I'm told that the call this evening was the first call that President Biden made to a European leader. And the real focus was on climate change. So President Biden has committed the US to re-signing up to the Paris Agreement on climate change, committed the country to net zero emissions by 2050. And this matters in the context of climate diplomacy in the UK at the moment, because the UK will be chairing that COP26 summit on climate change, United Nations summit in Glasgow in November.
All right, thank you for the update. Thanks, Chris. Now, the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, has condemned authorities in Russia after police there detained more than 2,000 people at protests in support of the jailed opposition leader, Alexei Navalny. Large gatherings took place across Russia, including the eastern cities of Vladivostok and Khabarovsk. In the Siberian city of Yakutsk, protesters braved temperatures of minus 50 degrees. The main demonstration was in the capital, Moscow, from where our correspondent Steve Rosenberg reports.
In Moscow, you can feel the anger. Police had warned people any protest would be broken up. Any protester risked arrest. But thousands came to Pushkin Square to support the Kremlin's fiercest critic, Alexei Navalny. Freedom to Navalny, they cried, and Russia without Putin. On her way to the protest, Mr. Navalny's wife, Yulia, was detained by police. So were hundreds of others for taking part in what the authorities called an unsanctioned gathering.
For years, the Russian authorities made out that Alexei Navalny had minimal support across the country, that he was in no way a threat to them. But these scenes of riot police and detentions suggest the Kremlin is more worried than they've been letting on.
In a direct challenge to Vladimir Putin, whom he accuses of ordering the nerve agent attack on him, Alexei Navalny returned to Russia last weekend and was arrested for an alleged parole violation. Russia isn't investigating his poisoning, it's investigating him. The Kremlin denies any involvement in the attack. There were pro-Navalny rallies across Russia today. Things heated up in Vladivostok. In Yakutsk, it was minus 50, but there were protests here too. But the Kremlin rarely gives in to pressure, especially from the street. Instead of compromise, expect a crackdown. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
The students from more than 50 universities are taking part in a rent strike in protest at how the pandemic has affected their studies. Many courses, of course, have moved to remote learning, which has caused some students to go back home. And with mental health also a big concern, the higher education regulator is calling for more financial and emotional support for students. Adina Campbell reports.
A lonely figure in one of the UK's largest cities. Life in Sheffield for third-year student Harry Smith isn't what it used to be. Stuck indoors in a tiny room, he's one of a handful of people left in this block of flats, normally home to hundreds. His only contact with the outside world, working part-time at the local supermarket.
I've told my university many times, you should have told us to stay at home and do a virtual degree. It would have saved £5,000 for me on rent. It would have saved coming here, switching jobs, ruining my mental health, that sort of thing. But I think someone needs to step in, the government, the accommodation themselves, or the university, to sort of alleviate these contracts that we're tied up to.
Sheffield Hallam University says it quickly communicated that teaching would be online until the end of February and has prioritised mental health support. Harry has just about managed to pay his rent for the next few months, but others are choosing not to and are taking part in a rent strike campaign at more than 50 universities in the UK. The Department of Education and governments in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland say millions of pounds has been made available to help those experiencing financial difficulties, as well as funding for better access to online learning. But some have reached breaking point. Reese, not his real name, decided to drop out of his first year at university after just 6 weeks before Christmas.
I've been seeing counsellors really at the moment since I've dropped out. It's pretty much rotting where I stand, really. I haven't had the motivation to do anything else or find anything else. One of the most painfully lonely experiences I've ever had.
Remote learning is now the everyday reality for people like Harry. With just a few months left until he graduates, the end of his degree couldn't come soon enough. Adina Campbell, BBC News in Sheffield.
The American talk show host Larry King has died. In a career spanning 6 decades, he made his name at CNN, interviewing some of the biggest names in politics, show business and sport. Daniela Ralph looks back at his life.
For more than 60 years, he interviewed everybody who was anybody.
Tonight, the legendary Liza Minnelli on marriage. Would you marry again?
Are you nuts? From Oscar winners to presidents.
The decision to remove Saddam Hussein was the right decision.
If you were in the public eye, you came to the court of Larry King.
It's the witching hour.
Born in Brooklyn, he began his career in radio.
From the nation's capital, you're listening to The Larry King Show.
By the 1970s, he was broadcasting his late-night show coast to coast.
Across the United States, this is The Larry King Show.
Then, in the 1980s, King joined a new 24-hour TV news station, CNN, where he heard an early denial of political ambition.
I have no intention of running for president, but I'd like the point to get across that we have a great country, but it's not going to be great for long if we're going to continue to lose $200 billion a year.
His style was to gently probe and to not hit hard.
I learned that the more I drew back, asked good questions, listened to the answers, cared about the guest, the biggest compliment you could get, as Sinatra once said, you make the camera disappear.
Larry King was married 8 times and was presenting shows well into his 80s. An interviewer of enormous influence.
They go, cut, cut!
Who said he never prepared too much and liked the conversation to unfold.
Larry King, who has died aged 87. Let's take you to the sport now with John Watson, who's at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi, John.
Kate, thanks very much. Good evening. We start with the FA Cup. Match of the day follows the news. So if you don't want to know the results, look away now. League Two Cheltenham Town threatened to pull off one of the big shocks. They were leading Manchester City with 9 minutes of their 4th round tie remaining, only to concede 3 late goals, as Ben Croucher reports.
For a team used to raising the bar, changing in one will have been a new experience. The surroundings in Cheltenham may have been unfamiliar, but City's goal was clear. Cheltenham's goal was, as you might expect, busy. Still, the League Two side held their own, no fireworks. Well, inside the stadium anyway. After the pyrotechnics paused play, the moment to ignite the tie. No sparkling football, no matter. One long throw, a couple of ricochets, and Alfie May's right foot.
And Cheltenham lead Manchester City!
In a town famed for its horse racing, what were the odds on this? The finishing post wasn't in sight just yet, not when City have talent on tap. Just 9 minutes from time, Phil Foden drew them level. The upset dash, the tie turned in 3 minutes. Gabriel Jesus beat the offside trap and the Cheltenham keeper to end their brave resistance. Prodding in a third in stoppage time was Ferran Torres to confirm their place in the 5th round, but they might need a stiff drink after this. Ben Croucher, BBC News.
Well, elsewhere today, Sheffield United beat Plymouth Argyle. The cup holders, Arsenal, are out, beaten 1-0 by Southampton. Swansea City scored 5 against Nottingham Forest, whilst West Ham were 4-0 winners over Doncaster. In the Scottish Premiership, Rangers now hold a 23-point gap over Celtic. Steven Gerrard celebrating his 150th match in charge with a 5-0 win over Ross County. After a devastating display of bowling from James Anderson, a cool head was needed from captain Joe Root as England replied to Sri Lanka's first innings total of 381, ending day 2 of the second test in Gaul on 98 for 2, as Joe Wilson reports.
Life without Anderson for England is still unthinkable. His first wicket came after review and replay. Angelo Matthews given out caught when the spike of sound suggested he'd hit it 110 and trudge off. Step forward Niroshan Dickwella. England's spin bowlers made no impact. It needed you-know-who. Dickwella caught and gone for 92. Next Saranga Lakmal, out for none. Anderson excelling far from home. But Sri Lanka still made a strong total thanks to Dilruwan Pereira. 381 for the bat, 6 wickets for Anderson. Other numbers don't matter.
Age is something that I don't really take into account. I don't wake up thinking, right, I'm 38 and however many days. I'm thinking, I'm still someone who can do a job for England. I can still win games of cricket.
England's chance in this test depends on their batting, underway with Sibley on his way for naught. Crikey, there goes Crawley. Sri Lanka's spinner, Embuldinia, made it look easy. England needed composure. Joe Root displayed it. Batting's the balance of defend and attack. Johnny Bairstow's perfectly capable. England are 281 behind, but they're putting some pressure back on Sri Lanka. 2 Yorkshiremen showing nerve in Gaul. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
A quick reminder, there's plenty more over on the BBC Sport website tonight. For now, though, that's all from me. It's back to you, Kate.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Well, that's all from me as well, and from the team here. Tomorrow morning from 9, Andrew Marr will be joined by the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, and Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. From me, though, and the team here, very good night to you. Bye-bye.